In this episode, one of the most heartbreaking shows Voyager ever produced, Icheb risks his life to help 7 of 9. And survives. This is a review of the Star Trek Voyager episode Imperfection. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know why Borg keep little bottles of Midori in their foreheads, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. Are the producers of Voyager about to kill off their most popular character near the beginning of the show's final season? The suspense is killing me! Before we get to focus on that aforementioned popular character, it's time to deal with these three. Mizadi, the creepy little girl, and Azan and Rebby, the creepy twins. Voyager has made contact with Azan and Rebby's people, and a ship has arrived to pick them up, and the suckers who are adopting the twins have agreed to adopt Mizadi as well. Let's all bid a tearful farewell to these characters who were introduced half a season ago and have barely been in the show. Bye, kids! Icheb, sadly, has decided to remain on Voyager. In the hallway, after the kids beam out, he notices that 7 is crying. Icheb is like, "Are you crying because I'm not leaving too?" And 7's like, "No, you're confusing me with the audience. There must be something wrong with one of my Borg parts." So 7 goes to sickbay for a checkup. The doctor says, "Hey, crying is nothing to be ashamed of. You had an emotional response to those unsettling children we hadn't grown attached to leaving the ship. It's totally normal." Then the computer beeps at him and the doctor is like, "Oh shit, never mind. It's not totally normal. There's a glitch in your primary Borg doohickey. I'll run some more tests and keep the captain informed." Actually, could we keep this between us? Doctor-patient confidentiality? Well, you're the first Star Trek character ever to ask for that, but sure, I guess. 7 goes to the astrometrics lab where Icheb is waiting. He says, "Hey, I've made a decision. I want to go full-on Wesley Crusher." "So you're going to be recast with a better actor and develop a personality?" "No, I want to take the Starfleet Academy entrance exam, but I'll need your help and a letter of recommendation from the captain." Sure, whatever. Just then, 7 notices something swimming around under the skin of her hand, and she's like, "Well, that's not normal," and she makes an excuse and heads to the cargo bay to regenerate. Only the computer tells her she can't regenerate because her alcove can't interface with her glitching primary Borg doohickey. So she goes to the mess hall and stays up all night drinking milkshakes instead. Neelix shows up and offers to make her breakfast, but she collapses and has a seizure. I've never heard of giving someone a priori food poisoning before. That's really impressive, Neelix. Cuts have opened up in her skin, revealing metal underneath. Well, there's your problem. She's a Terminator under there. No wonder she's always in such a bad mood. When she wakes up in sickbay, the doctor and the captain are there, and they've got some bad news. 7, Captain Janeway says, "your body is rejecting your implants." Which implants are we talking about? The Borg implants. Gotcha. It seems that 7's primary Borg doohickey isn't merely glitching, it's failing. When it gives out all the way, the Borg implants that 7's body relies on to, stay alive, will shut down, and 7 will, die. But not to worry. Captain Janeway has a plan. It just so happens that about a week ago, Voyager passed a Borg debris field. They're going to go back to that debris field, find a dead Borg drone with an intact primary doohickey, and scavenge the doohickey from its corpse and give it to 7. Janeway announces her plan to the bridge crew. She'll take the Delta Flyer into the Borg debris field herself in order to find a replacement primary Borg doohickey for 7. Tom Paris is like, "I want to go. The last time you took the Delta Flyer out, it got blown up. Fortunately, we were able to build a new one off-screen because nothing that happens in this show matters. But still." While Janeway, Paris, and Tuvok take the Delta Flyer to collect the Borg part they need, Icheb visits 7 in sickbay. He's like, "Are you sick?" And 7 says, "No, I'm perfectly well." And Icheb says, "Then why aren't you in well bay?" 7's like, "Doctor, get this dork out of my face." So the doctor pulls Icheb aside in his office and says, "Icheb, 7's not angry with you. She's just angry in general because she's sick. She doesn't want to appear vulnerable to other people. It's embarrassing. But she shouldn't be embarrassed around me. I'm her friend. You are also her pupil. She doesn't want you to see her at less than her best. But it's not her fault that she's sick." "No, but we need to give her space to deal with her illness in her own way." Do you find this conversation extremely basic and banal? I find you extremely basic and banal. Now get lost. I'll call you if Seven decides she wants company. Janeway, Paris, and Tuvok reach the Borg debris field and locate a section of the wreckage where there seem to be some intact Borg corpses. Janeway and Tuvok beam over, and Janeway finds a promising-looking candidate. She scans him and goes, "We're in luck. His primary Borg doohickey is undamaged, and he's an organ donor." Captain Janeway uses a laser to cut a skin flap off of the dead Borg's forehead, which, for some reason, she places in her toolbox instead of just tossing it aside. Why is she saving the skin flap? What weird, sick insight into Janeway's private life have we inadvertently stumbled onto here? Anyway, she pushes a button, and a tiny bottle of Midori pops up out of the Borg's forehead. Janeway grabs it, but before they can beam away, 3 guys show up like, "Hey, what are you doing here? This is our salvage. We're gonna fight you." And they fight for like a minute. Janeway and Tuvok beam back to the Delta Flyer. They fight off the salvage guys' ship, and they get away. I guess they felt like they needed a bit of action to manufacture some excitement, or the episode was running short, or something. I don't know. They head back to Voyager, and the Doctor, Captain Janeway, and Tom Paris all take part in the surgery to swap Seven's broke-ass Borg doohickey for the one Janeway yanked out of the skull of that corpse. But something's wrong. Seven's forehead rejects the new little bottle of Midori. It's not working. She's gonna die. Oh my God, they are gonna kill her off after all. Then the Doctor's like, "Psych! Computer and program," and it turns out this was just a simulation of the surgery to replace Seven's primary Borg doohickey. They've run a bunch of these simulations, and none of them have worked. The Doctor thinks the replacement doohickey was inactive in the skull of that dead Borg for too long. The procedure is bound to fail. Janeway is like, "Well, at least I snagged that sweet addition to my skin flap collection." By the way, the effect shot they use in the surgery scenes when the little bottle of Midori is being removed or inserted into someone's forehead, very nicely done. Anyway, they break the bad news to Seven. She wants to go back to work to make herself as useful as possible before the end, but the Doctor orders her to stay in sickbay. So she deactivates the Doctor, who is but a holographic man after all, and goes to main engineering, where she has a chat with B'Elanna about what happens when you die. B'Elanna tells her, "Look, don't worry about the afterlife. Worry about your legacy here on this ship. You've impacted the lives of everyone here." Seven's like, "I guess I don't have to be good enough." The Doctor, who has been reactivated, finds Seven and grudgingly allows her to remain outside of sickbay as long as she wears this bottle cap with blinky lights on it behind her ear so he can monitor her vital signs. The Doctor returns to sickbay, and Icheb shows up like, "I know how to save her. Just take out my primary Borg doohickey and give it to her." The Doctor's like, "But then you die." And as attractive as that option sounds, the captain really doesn't like it when I kill members of the crew. She prefers to do that personally. Icheb insists. He's young. He was liberated from the collective before being fully Borgified. His body can adjust. The Doctor says, "But how will you regulate your Borg implants without a primary doohickey?" And Icheb says, "You can resequence my genetics to adjust." Ha ha! Technobabble to the rescue! On Voyager! Who would have thought? The Doctor is still reluctant to allow Icheb to donate his doohickey, and Seven outright refuses. So Icheb goes ahead and deactivates the doohickey himself to prove to the others that he can live without it. Seven still refuses to accept Icheb's help, but Icheb gives her a speech about how people should help each other, and accepting help from someone else is a good thing, and just take my primary Borg doohickey and stop being such a prick about this. Seven relents, and the Doctor swaps out Seven's malfunctioning miniature Midori for Icheb's, and 6 days later, Seven wakes up in her regeneration alcove, and she's all better! Yay! Icheb's in sickbay, and he's also gonna be fine, so at least Seven's better! Yay! The end. I know. The writers of the show gave themselves the perfect opportunity to kill off Icheb, and they didn't do it. But many years later, in the first season of Star Trek Picard, Icheb does die in exactly the kind of cruel and brutal manner that he deserves. So take some comfort in that. As for this episode, Imperfection, it's not terrible, but it's kind of all over the place, isn't it? There's some housekeeping in the first scene as they finally get rid of those creepy Borg kids. That scene, which emphasizes the fact that Icheb could be leaving with them but is choosing to stay on Voyager instead, seems to be setting us up for an Icheb episode. If Icheb stays, what will his role be? What's his future? Then it turns out to mostly be a 7 episode. The Icheb stuff does come back and pay off eventually, so it's not for nothing, but it does feel awkward that we start out on Icheb, then shift focus to 7, and Icheb's stuff is almost totally removed from 7's story for the early portion of the episode. He's talking about applying to Starfleet Academy and wanting to become a bridge officer, while 7 is dealing with her "my Borg brain is trying to kill me" problem, and Icheb doesn't even know about that until Janeway clues him in when he catches her on her way to the Delta Flyer to go scavenge for a new primary doohickey, a scene that plays like a late insert into the script after the writers realized Icheb hadn't found out about 7's situation yet. 7's own story is as unfocused as the episode in general. She's a very passive character for most of the episode, which is a problem since she's also the closest thing the episode has to a central character. She spends most of the episode in sickbay, grumbling. She breaks out eventually, deactivating the doctor to do it, but that happens off screen. Her scene in engineering with B'Elanna isn't bad. Their characters have an established tension, and going the other way with it and having them connect rather than struggle with each other works out well. 7's anxiety about death feels like it deserves more time than it gets. It's a big subject. A main character is facing her own mortality and wondering what, if anything, is going to happen after she dies. But it gets a couple of lines in this one scene and that's it. 7's big meaningful choice ends up being to allow Icheb to donate his doohickey to her, which is significant for her character, allowing herself to be vulnerable, allowing herself to depend on others, allowing others to risk their lives for her. But in making that choice, she's not acting, she's acquiescing. In an episode where she'd been more active in the story up to that point, it probably wouldn't be such a problem for me. But as it stands, Imperfection plays like a 7 of 9 episode where 7 doesn't really do much. As for Icheb, I think I've made it clear here and in previous reviews of episodes where he's featured that I'm not a fan of the character. I think he adds nothing to the show. I find him to be a flat, boring rehash of Wesley Crusher, and his story in this episode doesn't help as far as that goes. Why is Icheb staying on the ship instead of leaving with the other orphans? What's his path forward? He wants to apply to the Academy and join Starfleet. He wants to work on the bridge. The producers aren't working very hard to shake that Voyager is just recycled TNG reputation, are they? The episode leans pretty hard on the 7 and Icheb relationship, which is an issue for me because I don't buy that relationship at all, and I don't give a shit about one of the people in it. 7's supposed to have this maternal attachment to Icheb, and Icheb is supposed to view her as a surrogate mother and a mentor, but it never plays as anything other than characters doing what they've been scripted to do. Maybe it's because Icheb comes across so flat that it's impossible for me to believe that anyone really cares about him, or perhaps in the specific case of this episode, it's because the least interesting character is the one taking the risk. Icheb risking his life to save 7 might have worked if I gave a shit about Icheb. But nothing in this episode makes me care about him, and nothing in any of the episodes leading up to this one makes me care about him either. He's a character I don't give a shit about, potentially making a noble sacrifice for a character I do give a shit about. That's nice. Would it have worked better the other way around, with 7 deciding to take a risk to save Icheb? Maybe. I'm definitely more invested in 7, and therefore also in her choices and the consequences of those choices, but I think no matter how you arrange it, the problem is always going to be Icheb. I don't believe he's a real person. I don't believe the other characters on the show genuinely care about him. I don't care what happens to him. And the fact that he's a half-hearted Wesley Crusher clone certainly doesn't help. There's a nice scene in this episode I haven't mentioned. It's toward the end, after 7 has learned that she's probably going to die, but before she knows that Icheb intends to donate his Borg doohickey to save her. 7 is in astrometrics, looking at a picture of the Grand Canyon. Janeway walks in. They talk about the Grand Canyon and Janeway's own home in the farmlands of Indiana. Janeway says to Seven, "I'll take you there when we get to Earth." Seven says, "I don't think I'm going to make it to Earth." And they have this brief but heartfelt conversation about death and when to accept it and give up and when to keep fighting. They talk about their relationship. It's a lovely little scene. Do you know what makes it such a lovely little scene? I believe it. When Seven reminds Janeway of other crew members who have died during Voyager's journey home and expresses her concern that Janeway won't be able to get over Seven's death the way she's gotten over those others, it plays as genuine. Seven, in her stoic way, telling Janeway that she's worried that Janeway won't be okay after Seven is gone. When Janeway tells Seven that she's proud of the progress Seven has made, that Seven has grown into an extraordinary individual since her liberation from the Borg, and that Janeway's having trouble accepting Seven's death because she doesn't want to lose a friend, it comes across as real, as the truth. Not just characters in a TV show saying the words they've been scripted to say, but people having a sincere, emotionally open conversation. If that scene and that relationship between Janeway and Seven was the rule for Voyager rather than one of the exceptions, I'd like Voyager as a series a whole lot more. And if the rest of Imperfection played as well and felt as real and meaningful as that scene, I'd like this episode a whole lot more too. Instead, we got what we got. Those are my thoughts on Imperfection. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time as this batch of reviews of episodes about Orphans concludes with a look at the one and only episode of Star Trek Enterprise in this batch, an episode from that show's third season titled Hatchery. See you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.